A cold wind swept through the nearly empty train station as a young woman sat on a wooden bench, her shoulders hunched, clutching a worn-out purse to her chest. Inside, she had only a single $10 bill left, the last bit of money she owned. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she kept staring at the bill, torn between buying a meal or saving it for the uncertainty of tomorrow. Every option felt like a gamble, and her weary eyes reflected the weight of choices far heavier than a simple $10. As she wrestled with her thoughts, a man nearby caught her attention. He stood by the ticket machine, patting his coat and checking his pockets again and again, his face tight with worry. He approached the counter, asked about the fare, and his shoulders sank when he realized he didn't have his wallet. The train he needed was minutes away, yet he had no way of paying for it. For a moment, she hesitated, knowing full well what that bill meant to her. But something stirred inside her, a quiet voice reminding her that kindness often matters more than comfort. With a deep breath, she rose and walked over. "Excuse me," she said softly, holding out the $10 bill. The man blinked, startled. "I can't take that from you," he whispered, but she pushed it into his hand and smiled faintly. "You need it more than I do right now." His eyes filled with gratitude as he accepted the money. The train arrived with a screech, and he turned once more to look at her before disappearing inside. She sat back down, her purse now empty, her stomach still empty, but her heart, for the first time in days, felt full. The man's hands trembled slightly as he searched his empty pockets, the frustration on his face clear. The young woman watched him for a moment, her fingers brushing over the worn purse in her lap. That last $10 bill had been her lifeline, her only security for the coming day. But as she looked at the stranger's helpless expression, something inside her shifted. She knew exactly what it felt like to be stuck, hopeless, and unseen. Slowly, she rose from the bench and walked toward him, her voice soft but steady. "Here," she said, holding out the bill. "Take this." His eyes widened as if she had offered him far more than money. I can't take that from you," he stammered, shaking his head. "You don't even know me." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though her own heart pounded with the weight of what she was giving up. "That doesn't matter," she replied gently. "You look like you need it more than I do right now." The man stood frozen for a second, his expression torn between disbelief and gratitude. At last he reached out and took the money, his voice hushed but full of emotion. "Thank you. I promise one day I'll repay this kindness." She simply nodded and stepped back, her hands empty now but her spirit strangely lighter. As the man turned to buy his ticket, he kept glancing back at her, as though he couldn't quite understand why a stranger would sacrifice the little she had left. And though her stomach still ached with hunger, she sat down again with a quiet sense of peace, unaware that her small, selfless act was about to change her life forever. The train screeched to a halt, its doors sliding open with a hiss. The man clutched the freshly bought ticket in his hand and gave the woman one last grateful glance before stepping inside. She lifted her hand in a small wave, managing a faint smile despite the emptiness in her stomach and the reality of her empty purse. As the train pulled away, she sat back on the cold bench, a strange mix of emotions filling her chest. She had nothing left, no money, no certainty about tomorrow, but her heart carried an unexpected lightness. For the first time in days, she felt as though she had done something that truly mattered. Meanwhile, inside the train, the man settled into a seat by the window, his eyes lingering on the woman who had just given away her last bit of security. He shook his head in quiet amazement. In his world of business meetings and luxury, he rarely encountered such raw, uncalculated kindness. What she didn't know, and what he hadn't revealed, was that he was no ordinary traveler. He was a millionaire, the owner of a successful company, and someone who rarely went anywhere without his assistant handling the details of his life. But on this day, he had chosen to travel alone, carrying no wallet, no cards, nothing, only to be reminded of what true generosity looked like. As the train sped through the night, he leaned back, a thoughtful smile crossing his face. That woman had given away her last $10 without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. She believed she was helping a stranger, unaware that her act of compassion had reached the heart of someone with the power to change her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. A few days later, the woman returned to her tiny apartment after another exhausting search for work. The cupboards were nearly bare, and the silence of the room seemed heavier than usual. Just as she sank into the old chair by the window, a knock echoed at the door. She hesitated, surprised. Hardly anyone ever visited her. When she opened it, her breath caught. There he stood, the same man from the train station, but this time he was dressed in a sharp suit, his posture confident, his smile warm. In one hand he held a small bouquet of fresh flowers, and in the other a sealed envelope. "I told you I'd repay you someday," he said gently, his voice steady but filled with emotion. She stared at him in disbelief, unable to form words. Slowly, she accepted the envelope he handed her. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was not only the $10 bill she had given him, crisp and neatly folded, but also a letter offering her something far greater, a stable job at his company, a chance to rebuild her life, or enough financial support to ease the weight she had been carrying for so long. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked back up at him. "Why? Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because you gave when you had nothing," he replied softly. "That kind of kindness deserves to be honored." For the first time in months, hope flickered brightly inside her heart. What had begun as a simple act of compassion at a train station was now unfolding into a life-changing moment, proof that even the smallest kindness can open doors to miracles. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the envelope to her chest, her heart racing with disbelief and gratitude. The weight of her struggles, the endless nights of worry, the hunger, the loneliness, suddenly felt lighter, as if all of it had led her to this moment. She looked at the man, her voice trembling. "I never expected anything in return. I just wanted to help." He stepped closer, his gaze steady and sincere. "And that," he said softly, "is what makes it so powerful. You gave when you had nothing. That's the greatest wealth of all." Her lips quivered into a smile as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. In that instant, she understood that her sacrifice, though small in the eyes of the world, had carried a value far beyond money. The kindness she had freely given had returned to her in a way she never could have imagined, transforming not only her circumstances but her spirit as well. The man placed the flowers gently into her hands, a symbol of new beginnings, before turning to leave. She stood in the doorway, watching him walk away, her heart overflowing with hope. For the first time in so long, she felt certain that tomorrow would be brighter. And as she closed the door, she whispered to herself with a trembling smile, "Even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, sometimes even your own." The story reminds us all that miracles often begin with simple, selfless choices, and that one moment of compassion can echo far beyond what we could ever imagine. In the end, what began as a young woman's quiet sacrifice at a lonely train station became a powerful reminder of the unseen ripple effects of kindness. With only $10 to her name, she chose to help a stranger instead of herself, never knowing that the man she aided was capable of transforming her life. Her selflessness not only returned to her in the form of opportunity and hope, but also revealed a truth we often forget, that true wealth is not measured in what we keep, but in what we give. This story leaves us with a simple, timeless lesson. Even the smallest act of compassion can spark miracles, restore faith in humanity, and change lives in ways beyond imagination.